Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Stupid Canada, the show where we talk about all things stupid in Canada. Fuck, keep up, guys. Here's what we got this week. Trudeau's new housing plan, the very intense reaction to the NDP pulling out of the supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals, a revelation that some Canadian creators are part of a group that was paid millions of dollars to peddle Russian disinformation, a scheme which could be part of a much bigger conspiracy, including thousands of content creators across the globe, and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's unwillingness to even pretend to want to maintain free access to healthcare. But first up, the steelworker. I'm sorry, I can't believe I even have to talk about this, actually. But your guys' conspiracy theories ended up in the news, okay? Being cited as insane conspiracy theories, mind you. Like, we got left-wing conspiracy theories being made fun of in the news. Is this what you guys want? What's the strategy here? Trying to out-conspiracy theory the conservatives? It's never gonna happen, guys. If you can't beat them, join them. Like, what are we doing? If you haven't seen the steelworker video, honestly, I envy you. I'm gonna spare you because it's everywhere. I don't know, Google it if you want to watch it. Basically, it's a guy blaming Trudeau for all the things right-wing politicians blame on Trudeau to his face. That's it. And a lot of people have said the steelworker guy is not a steelworker guy at all. And it's secretly Pierre Poilievre associate Jeff Ballingall, or James Oakley, an employee of Jeff Ballingall. I don't know how to pronounce that. Ballingal? I don't know. And you know what? I've actually even seen some people say it's both somehow, actually. Which, you guys are making us look crazy. Do you see how crazy we look? The reason for this, I guess, is because Jeff Ballingall and James Oakley both work for Pierre Poilievre under their media company, Mobilize Media. So Jeff Ballingall or James Oakley was planted by Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party to go there and say a bunch of anti-Trudeau shit, which we've already heard a million times before, and totally own the libs, right? That makes sense, right? Yeah, I mean, not to me. Like, the whole thing is pretty low stakes, for starters, for like a whole conspiracy just to get someone to talk shit about Justin Trudeau in public, which people literally do all the time.
Piece of shit! Cockroach! Liar! Piece of shit!
I'm not shaking your hand, bro. You're a fucking piece of shit.
While you're here, nobody can pick up.
I am here.
While you're here, no one can pick
I
up
don't know
sand.
that, sir.
Like, what's the value in getting another guy to do it? I don't know. I have no idea. Particularly a guy who's not bringing up very good points. I don't get it. But also just visually, like, obviously, it's neither Jeff Ballingall or James Oakley. Two guys, by the way, who don't really look that much like each other at all, let alone like the steelworker in the video. Honestly, if anything, if James Oakley and Jeff Ballingall had a baby and that baby grew up to hate Trudeau, that could be the steelworker in the video, actually. I could see that. This got to the point that Mobilize Media owner Jeff Ballingall actually did an interview saying that that guy in the video is not him, but they bear a resemblance being, quote, two handsome guys. Yeah, that's why people got you confused, for sure. And I realize people pushing the conspiracy theory that it's Jeff Ballingall aren't gonna believe Jeff Ballingall, right? I did not do 9/11. And yeah, fair enough. But rest assured, guys, it's not either of them. First of all, the hairline is a dead giveaway. Are we supposed to believe Jeff Ballingall or James Oakley just grew in a widow's peak to film this anti-Trudeau video? Hey Jeff, it's me, Pierre Poilievre. Want to do a conspiracy? Of course I do, Pierre Poilievre. Hang on, let me just regrow my fucking hairline. But aside from this, I have 100% confirmation that this steelworker is definitely not Jeff or James, because my very smart friend sent me his Facebook. I'm not gonna dox the guy, but it's definitely him, okay? And you'll be glad to know his whole family is celebration posting that they're very proud of him for sticking it to Trudeau by blaming him for a deductible on dental insurance, I guess.
For people in my family, every
seniors?
time we go for a dental visit, it's costing me about $50 in my pocket per person.
Okay.
Why?
Way to go, dude. Next, we got Trudeau's housing plan. Let's have a listen.
Here's something we can all agree on. We need more housing in Canada. But that the government should step up and make sure that housing gets built, that's where some people disagree. Take federal lands, land that's owned by the federal government that isn't being used anymore. The Conservative Party leader wants to sell it all off to make a quick buck. That does nothing for you. The federal government owns tons of land in cities and towns across the country. You could build a lot of homes on those lands, so that's what we're going to do. We're offering up that public land for housing. And we're not just going to sell it all to developers, we're going to long-term lease it.
Okay, so more landlords? That's the big idea? More landlords. More landlords. Who the fuck asked for more landlords? Sorry about that, guys. Had to just compose myself there. Listen. Justy, Trudy, baby. More landlords is not going to fix this. Even if the government assumes the role of the landlord's landlord. Hey, yo, I heard you like landlords, so I put a landlord on your landlord and became your landlord's landlord. And this is just the newest in a series of desperate liberal attempts to try to fix the housing crisis via capitalism. Like, here's Justin just a few months ago saying 3D print companies are so innovative, they'll solve the housing crisis. And in case this needs to be said, we're not going to innovate our way out of the housing crisis. Profiteering interests is why we're in the housing crisis to begin with. Everybody, private citizens, landlords, literally everybody in Canada seems to think they can just buy a house and rake in an enormous profit if they just hold on to it for long enough. Everyone expects the house to appreciate in value indefinitely forever. And you know what? It pretty much always does. If you look at the trends, buying a house is a foolproof investment. And it doesn't take a genius to tell you that if a graph's been going up consistently all the time forever, it will continue to go up unless something dramatically changes. Like, this is basic pattern recognition, guys. What we need to do, instead of expecting private industry to fix this for us, is revisit housing as an asset entirely and strongly consider if that's something we even want to allow for. Like, maybe everyone can have one house maximum, but the fact that 1/5 of all houses in Canada are owned by corporate investors just buying up as much property as humanly possible is fucking crazy. And this new plan to just lease to corporate investors, well, what's the fucking difference? They're not gonna invest in it unless they know they can turn a profit. And if they can turn a profit, it'll be at the expense of people living in the units that they'll be subletting. That's how commodifying shelter works. It's how commodifying anything works, actually. You buy it, or in this case, lease it, for a smaller price than what you'll sell it for, or rent it out for, and collect the difference. Basic business. And the fact we haven't come up with something better than let's get the people commodifying shelter for inflated prices to help us address the fact that shelter keeps inflating in price is stupid. It's fucking stupid. It's stupid that we're still doing this. Make housing a human right. Fuck developers. I don't want to hear shit about developers. If I hear developers mentioned one more time in a solution to the fucking housing crisis, I'm voting for the Communist Party of Canada. I'm sharpening the guillotine. We need Mao. Where is Mao? Next up, the NDP announced they're dropping the supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals. Huge news, or maybe not, apparently. We'll see, I guess. The supply and confidence agreement, innocuously known to conservatives as the Liberal NDP coalition, was a bipartisan agreement between the minority Liberal government and the NDP, basically allowing the Liberals to maintain a majority in votes of non-confidence, which, if you don't know, is when all the sitting members of parliament vote on whether to continue the government as is or to break it up and elect a new one. Majority rules: if 51% of parliament votes no, the government dissolves. Since Trudeau's Liberals hold a minority government, the supply and confidence agreement was critical to them maintaining power. In exchange for the promise of confidence from the NDP, the Liberals have pushed forward NDP legislation such as anti-scab laws that protect workers, paid sick leave for federal workers, and the National Dental Program. And the reaction to the NDP ending the agreement has been something else, honestly. Like, I am fighting for my fucking life in my Twitter comments right now, just for liking the NDP, which I can explain Please let me explain. Explanation necessary because the NDP is not looking so hot at the moment. Like, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is also fighting for his life because the NDP follow-up press conference to this announcement was not well received, like at all. The reporters asking questions were pretty clearly getting frustrated, mostly because Jagmeet seemed to not want to give a concrete answer about whether he would vote no confidence in the government, which is, of course, the logical conclusion of ending the supply and confidence agreement, but Jagmeet didn't seem so sure.
How can you get Canadians to vote for you when it comes to not triggering the election, keeping a weak government in power, and also giving the Liberals leniency when it came to implementing pharmacare?
We have ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau.
Basically, if Pierre Poilievre moves a non-confidence motion, will you support it?
In terms of any motion moving forward, we're going to look at that motion before we decide. We're not going to presuppose an outcome of that. But we have I have ripped up the agreement with Justin Trudeau.
You've said about a dozen times at least that you've ripped up the agreement and that makes an election more likely. But you've been asked several times and you won't answer. Do you have confidence in the Trudeau government as they stand now?
I will be clear again. We have absolutely ripped up the agreement with an election is more likely.
Clear. That's not clear. You're equivocating.
Okay, guys, and I don't want to jump to conclusions here, but I think he ripped up the agreement. But what people really want to know is if this will trigger an election. Jagmeet Singh can rip up as many pieces of paper as he wants. I imagine NDP HQ doesn't even have a shredder. It's just Jagmeet Singh tearing documents in half all day. But it doesn't make a difference if the NDP still has confidence in the government and will vote as such should a non-confidence motion arise. Like, sure, this may indicate decaying confidence in the government, and a lot of what was said in the press conference conveyed a similar message, but it's still not clear what's going to happen as far as whether or not this is going to affect the timing of an election. So that's been heavily criticized. And I don't know, to me it's pretty obvious they're not just going to give the government to the Conservatives, which calling an election right now, or as soon as Parliament resumes, would effectively do. I assume they hope to climb in the polls a bit before making any rash decisions. Fingers crossed. Maybe they'll leverage this to push the Liberals to pass even more legislation. I don't know. We'll have to see. But this doesn't necessarily mean an election is imminent, which, again, would probably mean a Conservative government, which the NDP definitely wants even less than a Liberal government, so I wouldn't expect that anytime soon. Another criticism of Jagmeet pulling out of the agreement is that it comes very shortly after Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre very loudly called on Jagmeet to pull out of the agreement, dubbing him Sellout Singh, which he's now upgraded to Stuntman Singh, by the way, which is way cooler. Jagmeet should get like a motorcycle or something. While we're on the subject, Pierre's affinity for nicknaming his opponents with admittedly very catchy pejoratives is really giving Trump. I digress. I think the general outlook on this is that Jagmeet is only doing this because of mounting pressure from Pierre and the Conservatives, which makes sense, I guess, because it was right after Pierre said something. But that was right after Jagmeet said something. Like, Pierre brought this up a week after Jagmeet said he was already considering ending the agreement based on the Liberal response to the rail strike. A response that was truly abysmal, by the way. And yeah, obviously, if you scope out, the Conservatives have been criticizing the supply and confidence agreement, the costly coalition.
Their costly coalition.
A costly coalition.
The costly coalition.
The costly coalition.
Since the moment it began. But as far as recent developments on that dialogue, there was an announcement by Jagmeet that he might end the agreement. Then there was an announcement from Pierre, which seemed to get way more attention, that Jagmeet should end the agreement. And now here we are. Jagmeet ended the agreement. Take from that what you will, I guess. Another criticism of this decision is well summarized by a question from the Globe and Mail's Laura Stone.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Laura Stone, Globe and Mail. I think a lot of Canadians watching this right now might be a bit baffled by the political posturing that's going on. You've propped up the government for 2 years. Now all of a sudden they're terrible because of some vague notion of corporate greed, and you're refusing to say whether you'll bring down the government at the first opportunity. What is the point of all this, sir?
What indeed? I'm not sure why it wasn't stated in the press conference, but an NDP official, when reached for comment, communicated to me that this was based on a number of things. That's right, I got quotes now. Your boy got quotes. The government response to the recent rail strike, which Jagmeet threatened to end the agreement over, was listed. But so was the National School Food Program, being delayed funding and not being implemented as a result. Delayed climate action, and delayed Indigenous justice. All of this being part of the pattern. Reasons Jagmeet did mention in the press conference included the Liberals being too beholden to corporate interests, i.e. the rail strike, even though that wasn't specifically mentioned. And that the Trudeau Liberals just aren't strong enough to beat the Conservatives. Which is obvious, according to the polls, if you believe the polls.
Oh yeah, if you believe the polls. I've never been polled. Have you ever been polled?
Which is not unwise because they're usually pretty accurate, though not 100%. But many people have pointed out that the NDP's performance in the polls is even weaker than the Liberals, both of which are being absolutely destroyed by the Conservatives. So what the fuck is he talking about? Well, it seems to me that the NDP's recent decline in public opinion is largely to do with their association with the Liberals, who's also seen a recent decline in public opinion. And let's be clear, guys. This is a Hail Mary. The Conservatives, as it stands now, will more than likely win the next election. Unless something dramatically changes. So yeah, maybe Laura Stone is right that this is political posturing. In an attempt to separate themselves from the Liberal government and generate actual change in voter intention before the Conservatives definitely win the next election. We can sit around and wait for the Conservatives to gain more and more traction and win the next election and cut funding for all of the achievements of the Supply and Confidence Agreement. Achievements they voted against, which seems to be what everyone is so afraid of. Or we could just take a risk and see what happens. And then the logical follow-up, is it worth the risk? The risk being Prime Minister Poilievre. Oh God, I think I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Well, first of all, like I said, this does not mean an election has to happen right away. But also, the risk of a Pierre Poilievre government was imminent before this announcement. So we're weighing the risk of a Pierre Poilievre government against a Pierre Poilievre government? Am I missing something? What's the problem? But also, the way I see it, Jagmeet Singh is right. The Liberals, although better than the Conservatives, are too beholden to corporate interests. And the NDP, despite this, leveraged the Liberal minority government with the Supply and Confidence Agreement to pass very good legislation. Legislation that the Liberals would not have passed otherwise. Dental care, pharmacare, anti-scab legislation. None of this is stuff a center party would pass without being forced to. But it's not enough. The Liberals just love corporations way too much. And the way I see it, siding with the railroad companies that locked the workers out, forced a strike, and then did a Uno reverse card and started crying about how the workers are holding the economy hostage, was the last straw. Or should I say, the last spike, am I right? Choo-choo, classic railroad joke. But seriously, I was saying the NDP should do this on last week's episode.
I mean, and this is going to be controversial. I continue to find myself saying that Jagmeet Singh needs to pull the plug on the confidence agreement with the Liberals. But I'm increasingly confident he will never do that. And I know people are going to disagree with this because if the NDP does anything, you risk the Conservatives winning. But at this point, guys, as far as what's good for workers, we know the Conservatives aren't, but the Liberals aren't either. And the Conservatives are winning that worker support, and the NDP is not. So by pulling the plug, it really does show that, no, there is an alternative for workers, and it's not the Conservative Party, because it's not.
And I can't be the only one who felt that way, because why would what was historically a union-backed workers' party let the government that they're allowing to keep being the government fuck over a union like this? Which brings us to the last criticism I saw, which is that based on ripping up the agreement, oh God, now I'm saying it, that Jagmeet Singh can't be trusted, which is insane to me because Trusted by who? It was loyalty to railroad workers who were promised collective bargaining and every other worker as an extension of that. School children who were promised a national lunch program. Indigenous people who were promised reconciliation, while many communities still don't even have clean drinking water. Or loyalty to the party that broke these promises. I don't know, guys. I prefer my politicians loyal to the people who elected them rather than, other politicians, but that's just me. Call me crazy. So the NDP really had no choice here, in my view. It was this or descend further and further into neoliberal hell. A hell which both the conservatives and liberals support. One which consistently favors corporate interests at the expense of literally everyone else. Speaking of a small group of millionaires' interests at the expense of everyone else, let's talk about the Russian asset YouTube network, Tenet Media. The United States Department of Justice just unsealed an indictment, and it essentially alleges that multiple creators with millions of followers, all working for the same group, received $10 million in funding to produce pro-Russia content to their American audiences. The 10 million is alleged to come from employees of Russia Today, Russia's state-controlled news network. A network which the European Union says promotes the government propaganda supporting the deployment of Russian forces in Ukraine. These influencers, although unnamed in the indictment, were quickly identified by Eric Toller of the New York Times as the collective Tenet Media. As all the information in the indictment seemed to match up with the company information, as well as information about the influencers employed by said company. Tenet Media's location, employee follower counts, and even Tenet's YouTube bio directly match that of the indictment. Quote from the indictment, the organization describes itself as a network of heterodox commentators that focus on Western political and cultural issues. And Tenet Media describes itself as a network of heterodox commentators that focus on Western political and cultural issues. Which is hilarious. No names. We want to keep this all anonymous. Make sure you put their very terrible slogan in there verbatim, though. Don't forget that. So the creators allegedly involved, Tenet Media's employees, are Lauren Southern, Tim Pool, Matt Christensen, Dave Rubin, Tyler Hansen, and Benny Johnson. Nightmare blunt rotation right here. Hit the blunt and start ranting about Jewish space lasers or some shit, Because all these guys are known for just the absolute worst, bottom of the barrel, garbage right-wing content there is. Anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-immigration, anti-Palestine, pro-Trump, you name it. This is that area of political content. Since this development, one of the influencers that seems to be anonymously listed in this indictment, Tim Pool, has all but confirmed that his employer, Tenet Media, is indeed the entity this indictment focuses on. It's worth mentioning Tim, pictured here wearing a 4-piece suit, the fourth piece being a toque, considers himself and his colleagues a bit of a victim in all this. Yeah, a victim of fashion police brutality. Look at this, the Twitter menswear guy is making fun of his outfit. He said, imagine spending $100,000 a week and seeing this outfit. Holy fuck. Holy shit. God forbid, if the Twitter menswear guy ever makes fun of my outfit, I'm logging off for good. You'll never see me again. Tim's victimhood to the Russian scandal is backed up by the indictment, which states the influencers themselves didn't know where the money was coming from. But Tim Pool, like the menswear guy said, was getting $100,000 a week as per the indictment to produce one episode a week. If I was getting $100,000 per episode just to read scripts like this.
Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy. Ukraine is the greatest threat to this nation and to the world. We should rescind all funding and financing, pull out all military support, and we should apologize to Russia.
I'd probably have a few questions about where that 100,000 is coming from. But no, all these political commentators, supposedly pretty politically aware people, all read what is clearly Russian propaganda, took their $100,000 checks, and just didn't think anything of it. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tenet Media is an American company that primarily focuses on American issues. It's a U.S. Department of Justice indictment. What the fuck does this have to do with Canada? Well, I'm glad I pretended you asked. Of the 6 employees, 1 is a Canadian with a huge Canadian audience, Lauren Southern, or as the Southern Poverty Law Center likes to call her, the alt-right's Canadian dog whistler. The rest of the group, the Americans, certainly overlap with Canadian audiences, but so does a lot of American content, so maybe that one doesn't matter as much. And the big one, the company involved, Tenet Media, is a subsidiary of a Canadian company called Roaming Millennial. Ah, so the plot thickens in the worst way possible. Truly a twist ending no one asked for. Okay. Some might remember Roaming Millennial as like an older right-wing YouTuber whose real name is Lauren Chen. Her channel was more popular in the past, and honestly, I thought she just fell off. But no, apparently she was busy creating shell companies to funnel dark Russian money into Canada. Great. So basically Lauren incorporated her YouTube company using her YouTube channel name as the company name, Roaming Millennial. Roaming Millennial, the company, is owned by Lauren Chen and another Canadian right-wing influencer named Liam Donovan. Lauren and Liam, a married couple, how romantic, I now pronounce you Russian assets, are the only people listed in this indictment that are said to have for sure known this money was being provided by Russia for propaganda purposes. So out of 8 Tenet Media associates, 3 are Canadian, 2 of which are at the very top of this conspiracy. Not to mention, Tenet Media has produced at least 51 videos specifically pertaining to Canadian political issues, as documented by Luke LeBrun of Press Progress, before all the videos were taken down. Shout out Luke LeBrun. This guy's doing God's work, honestly. In a good way, though. Not like killing pagans or some shit. Now, the Department of Justice alleges the campaign was designed to amplify domestic divisions and manipulate American public opinion. But it makes sense that if the campaign was also focused on other countries, the DOJ might leave that out of the indictment because it's not exactly their jurisdiction or frankly something they'd even necessarily care about. The American Department of Justice is primarily concerned with, you guessed it, American justice. But the amount of Canadian involvement in this scheme means our government is almost certainly looking into this, and I imagine the situation will develop shortly. And I wouldn't be surprised if it came to light that other Canadian political influencers were being paid by Russia as well. I'm looking at you, Rebel News. And not just the Ukraine stuff. Like, yeah, that's a big part of it. Russia is obviously invested in having some kind of social license to invade Ukraine, which a lot of Tenet's content is related to. But like, the indictment said a big part of the plan was to amplify division. And it's not a coincidence Russia chose right-wing personalities to get this job done. Because a lot of the subjects these right-wing influencers already talk about are divisive as fuck and align with Russian interests, making them ripe for Russian interference. You know, a lot of these right-wing personalities are already anti-immigrant, anti-gay, pro-Trump, all shit that aligns them with Russia. So Rebel News, driving around the anti-Muslim truck or inviting anti-Muslim activists to Canada to speak about immigration. Lauren Southern, the Canadian employee of Tenet Media, on YouTube telling her followers that you can't trust what you hear in the media about Ukraine. The Western Standard rallying its base to harass trans people in change rooms. Rebel News contributor Manny Montenegrino saying Trump is the real president of the people. All of this stuff would work really well with Russian campaigns to amplify division and skew public opinion towards a place that benefits Russia. I'm not saying that these people I just named are Russian assets. All I'm saying is, if I'm Russia, these are the guys I'm funding for my disinformation and division campaign. Disclaimer for the most litigious man in all of Canada, Rebel News owner Ezra Levant. I don't think Ezra Levant is funded by Russia. Not because I think he's above it. I just imagine if he was, he wouldn't be begging for money on Twitter all the time. And you know what? If there was Russian interests involved with these right-wing influencers, It would explain a lot, like why so many of them seem to support Russia in the war on Ukraine, for starters. The recent notable increase of anti-immigrant sentiment. The recent noticeable increase of anti-2S LGBTQ plus sentiment. People who are still anti-vaxxers. Like, shut the fuck up. It's been years. If you don't want to get the vax, don't get the vax. Just shut the fuck up. Like, I was making fun of Lauren Southern's stance on immigration like 2 weeks ago. And if you told me 2 weeks ago that she was a Russian asset meant to amplify divisive rhetoric in Canada, well, honestly, I probably would have believed you. Because it just makes so much sense. Like, here I am thinking no one can hold these opinions in good faith. And I was right. They hold these opinions because Russia pays them a bunch of fucking money to. Thanks for helping make that really obvious, Lauren Southern. Also, look at this. She says, if you don't believe immigrants bad, you must be ideologically compromised. Says the person literally being paid by Russia to sow division on subjects like immigration. Like, you can't make this up. This is insane. I should also mention that Lauren Southern once ran in a Canadian federal election. She fucking failed because she sucks, obviously, but also because she ran for the Libertarian Party, which also sucks. Obviously. The Libertarian Party, though, to its credit, doesn't have much answering to do on this one because they actually kicked her out of the party for saying rape culture does not exist in Canada. Jesus fucking Christ. I wonder how much Russia paid her to say that. And yeah, like, it's pretty fucking funny that exactly who you'd expect to be a paid Russian asset promoting Russian interests in Canada is a paid Russian asset promoting Russian interests in Canada. But it's also highly concerning and very serious. Like, this is effectively treason. Actually, let me check on that. Sorry, I'm not really up on my laws that only 5 people have ever gotten in trouble for. Okay, honestly, it doesn't seem like it's treason. Unless you count Russia Today employees as armed forces, which is a stretch probably. Like, I don't know, maybe you can, because they effectively collaborate with Russian armed forces by trying to justify the invasion of the Ukraine. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, okay? Get off my case. What I do know is that Russia has interfered with and attempted to manipulate United States elections using online content. Now, they're funding a group of Canadians to do the same thing, with the inclusion of a bunch of Canadian-oriented content. So maybe it's not explicitly illegal, which it probably is, or should be if it's not. It's definitely fucked up. No two ways about it. This is really, really not a good thing to do, guys. And maybe it's true that the influencers themselves didn't know, although I highly doubt that they didn't at least have suspicion about where the millions of dollars to spew Russian propaganda was coming from. Hello, here is script. This just says, I hate Ukraine. Whoa, save it for camera. That was perfect. Here is 100,000 ruble. I am American businessman. Go Yankees. Goodbye. But at the very least, the Canadian owner of Tenet Media, Lauren Chen, willfully collaborated with Russia to do this. As did her also Canadian husband, Liam Donovan. Yes, it's an American company, primarily focused on American issues, but the owner and definitive Russian collaborator is Canadian. Some have speculated this is by design due to the fact that Canada doesn't have RICO laws.
This was centered in Canada for a specific reason. We don't have RICO laws. And so it's a lot easier to hustle money through Canada to Canadians.
RICO being the legislation which allows organized conspirators of a crime to be charged for a crime that the organization committed. These laws were instrumental in bringing down the mafia, since there was always some degree of separation between the bosses and those actually committing the crimes. So by doing this through a Canadian company, Russia could theoretically avoid being targeted by RICO and thus avoid conspiracy charges for the whole chain of command. It doesn't make RICO charges impossible, but it certainly makes them more complicated. For one, there's obvious jurisdictional issues. The US government and Canada would have to collaborate to gather evidence about the roaming millennial company. Then there'd have to be an extradition process for any Canadian involved to be held accountable under RICO, which is complicated in and of itself. And all of this just relies on diplomacy between the US and Canada. So while it's not impossible, Russia setting it up through the Canadian parent company allows for the separation of bosses and executors that RICO laws seek to eliminate. So Putin is playing fucking 3D foreign policy chess using the dumbest right-wing idiots he can possibly find as pawns, which is like, duh, why wouldn't he? This is a KGB agent's wet dream. These guys are way too fucking stupid or morally bankrupt to even begin to understand why this whole operation is problematic. Here's Tim Pool and co. advocating bringing back the death penalty for treason so they can kill their political opponents.
Should Democrats be in jail? No question. When Donald Trump gets elected, should he start locking them up? No question. Should there be lists of Democrats that need to go to jail? 100%. And the reason for that is they've committed crimes.
Not just jail, they should get the death penalty. You know, we actually used to have the punishment for treason in this country.
Like, congratulations, you fucking moron. You just called for your own execution. This one is definitely going to continue to develop. This is just the tip of the Russian conspiracy iceberg. Because another American document unsealed this week, this time by the FBI, according to an article by David Gilbert at Wired, alleges Russia is tracking 2,800 influencers in 81 countries, as well as 1,900, quote, anti-influencers, which the FBI thinks refers to creators that post content contrary to Russian objectives. In one meeting, a Russian government official wrote, "We need influencers. A lot of them, and everywhere. We are ready to wine and dine them." Wine and dine with $10 million, perhaps? Though no links have been confirmed between this operation and the roaming millennial tenant media thing, it indicates Russia is probably planning something similar on a much bigger scale. Or maybe it's already underway. Can't wait to play Guess Who's a Russian Asset with every content creator I find from here on out. Fuck. Next up, everyone's least favorite premier, Danielle Smith. Sorry, Scott Moe, you just don't have what it takes. Doug, you're on the right track. Keep getting drunk at 7-Eleven. Maybe a few cases in, you'll become as stupid as Danielle Smith. Because even Chug Ford over here has the decency to pretend like he wants everyone to access healthcare, even if he is willing to let private industry burn down the whole thing. But Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is fully mask off. Because not only did she just announce the plans to hand over some of Alberta's hospitals to private industry, she's announced plans to hand them over to the Catholic organization Covenant Health. Covenant Health is not just a private healthcare provider, if you can even call it that. It's a religious organization that doesn't allow its staff to provide basic medical treatment like emergency contraceptives, medical assistance in dying, abortion, and more, as per the Bible. Isn't that great? That we're going from an organization whose guiding doctrine is, I don't know, HIPAA, to one that's guiding doctrine believes medical treatment comes from a magic sky man who can get women pregnant telepathically. Isn't that great? So Danielle Smith is literally saying, yeah, you know the hospital where you have a right to access medical care? Yeah, we're giving it to people who will not administer that care, as per a 3,000-year-old book. To make matters even worse, if you can imagine that, Alberta just released a draft for its new Bill of Rights, even though the existing Bill of Rights is only 2 years old. So not sure who was asking for this, but here we are. And the new draft is not just stupid, it's dangerously stupid. Let's ease into it with the comically stupid part. Changing the line, the right of the individual to liberty, security of the person, and enjoyment of prosperity, and the right not to be deprived thereof by due process of law, to a simple Declaration of Independence reference is fucking hilarious. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. She just took this from the Declaration of Independence. This is word for word. Leave it to Danielle Smith, to Nicolas Cage, the second line of her own draft.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Except it's not her own draft. It was written by third-party consultants, a group that calls themselves the Black Hat Gang, which honestly are as nefarious as they sound, but way more nefarious than they look, because they look like this. But don't let their unassuming appearance deceive you, because their draft of the Bill of Rights, which predates this draft I just showed you, also included the right to life, but measured life from the moment of conception, which means exactly what you think it means. It's a direct attack on legal access to abortion, as it literally seeks to take away that right from the moment someone gets pregnant, because it's explicitly stating a fetus has a right to life. Very clearly. Now, to be fair, the United Conservative Party immediately came out and said it was leaked, it was never supposed to see the light of day, etc., and then released the draft without the moment of conception shit. But here's the thing. Why do you not control what's in your first draft? Why are you outsourcing drafting legislation? The government, get this, is supposed to write their own legislation. That's why we elected them. We didn't elect the Black Hat Gang. And if we did, I'm pretty sure we demand they get a better name and better costumes and better policy. I don't know. Fuck these guys. No one voted for them. But apparently Danielle Smith completely welcomed them drafting this legislation. Again, guys, the government is supposed to do that. But, you know, in Danielle's defense here, it's complicated. On one hand, you know, we have Danielle Smith handing over hospitals to people that want to limit access to legal abortion. But on the other hand, we have Danielle Smith handing over legislative duties to people that want to limit access to legal abortion. Wait a minute, that's the same thing. You just want to limit access to legal abortion. Why are you like this? I mean, damn, a little decorum, please. Can't you just pretend you're not a supervillain for like 3 seconds, please? You know, part of me wishes Alberta didn't already have privatized liquor stores, because then Danielle Smith could at least distract herself by making sure 7-Eleven sells twisted teas like Doug Ford's been doing. Right, Doug? Oh shit. Clean up an aisle. I guess it's a 7-Eleven. There's no aisles. Somebody help him. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far to the end of the video, well, good job. That's a long time. You're very patient. Consider checking out my Patreon if you want to. It's a lot of work producing this content, and I want to do it more. So the more financial report I receive, the more possible it is to do that. So to everyone currently doing that, you are awesome. Thank you so much. That's Brian, Cameron, Roma, Jillian, M, Laura Lee, Fahad. Look at that. Times New Roman, by the way. I don't know what we were doing with that Comic Sans before. Garbage. This looks so much better. Margaret, Mike, Andy, Maya, Colleen, David, Deborah, Derek, Left of Boom, Linda, Rob, SD, Aaron, Angelique, Colin, Dean, Elaine, Faulty, Ian, Jean-Paul, Jeffrey, Jennifer, Jeff, Jody, Joshua, Lori. Oh, I'm running out of breath. Mickey, Mohammed, Vern, Liz, Norma, Sarah, Stephanie, Sean the Bomb, Susan, Margot, Sal, Maurice and Marion, and Yvonne. Thank you all so much, whether you're an active contributor or you subscribed in the past and are taking a break, or you've just decided you're not subscribing anymore. That's cool too. Thank you for that support. Very much appreciated, and until next time. Okay, bye.